Just 1 minute ago, a private royal communication ignited a storm behind palace gates when an urgent order from Princess and abruptly halted Meghan Markle's return to royal life. This was no routine protocol, but a decisive, almost combative act that raised one pressing question. What did it uncover that compelled her to move so swiftly, so publicly, and with such finality? Hours before Meghan was expected to arrive in the UK, quiet preparations were already underway, schedules adjusted, invitations drafted, staff alerted, signaling what many believed would be a historic thaw and soft reintegration after years of estrangement. Then came the sudden reversal, a meeting, a decision, and a single chilling line leaking from a private email. Under no circumstances is she to be welcomed back. The British press was stunned. Known as the unyielding spine of the monarchy, Princess, and long disciplined and silent, had overridden palace advisors, some groomed under Queen Elizabeth II herself, in an extraordinary rupture of royal order that reportedly even caught King Charles off guard. This was not a suggestion but a command, driven not by rivalry but by a storm, and had been tracking for months, perhaps years. As royal aides began to whisper, one phrase surfaced again, and again she found something. Rumours pointed to Anne's recent time in the late Queen's private vault, a sealed world of handwritten letters and red-stamped files, where she allegedly uncovered evidence that didn't merely confirm her suspicions, but redefined them, forcing her to act to protect the institution. And so the order came down not from the throne or the press office, but from Anne herself, a woman who never sought the spotlight, yet now dragged the firm into its darkest hour. To understand this blockade, one must return to the past, where a royal feud was never resolved, only silenced, and where public smiles concealed a deeply volatile rivalry between Princess and Meghan Markle that palace aides once described as nothing short of volcanic. What began as cool indifference soon spiraled into whispered confrontations, backroom power plays, and one explosive moment that nearly fractured the firm. It was never going to be easy. Meghan didn't simply marry into a family. She stepped into a centuries-old institution built on hierarchy, heritage, and unspoken rules of power. At the center of that code stood Princess Anne, a woman shaped by duty, discipline, and decades of watching outsiders attempt and fail to change the system. From the moment Meghan entered the royal orbit, and was unmoved by the cameras, speeches, or polished smiles. To her, Meghan was not an ally but a risk, a storm disguised as charm. The tension began quietly with whispers, raised brows, and averted gazes at formal dinners, and making little effort to conceal her skepticism. While younger royals dismissed it as generational friction, palace staff noticed, recalling moments like a footman overhearing and mutter, "Another actress playing Princess," a line that felt less like rudeness and more like a warning. The strain became visible during the infamous balcony snub, when Anne deliberately stepped away from Meghan, eyes fixed forward, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. Tabloids speculated, but inside the palace it was understood as a message and saw through her and wanted others to see it too. The breaking point came weeks later when Meghan arranged a private lunch in hopes of easing the chill, only to leave in tears, the details sealed except for one leaked remark attributed to Anne. "You want to modernize the monarchy? Start by respecting it." Meghan never sought another one-on-one. Even King Charles, ever the mediator, urged Anne to soften and find common ground. But she refused, warning him with cold certainty that Meghan would tear it all down because she didn't understand what it took to hold it up. It wasn't bitterness but conviction, and from that moment Anne kept her distance while watching closely, reading between the lines of every interview, every leak, every carefully crafted statement. She wasn't merely offended, she was on alert, and when the hidden evidence finally surfaced, her decisive action was driven not just by duty, but by everything she had seen, felt, and long feared. Finally proven right, Anne's long-held conviction took on a darker meaning, because bitterness alone could not explain what she discovered buried beneath years of protocol and polite restraint. Deep within Windsor Castle lay the late Queen's private archive, sealed upon Elizabeth II's death and protected even from her closest heirs, a place few knew existed and fewer still were meant to enter. Just weeks ago, Anne was granted access, and what she found would change everything. Hidden dossiers, handwritten notes, and a piece of intelligence marked confidential, material so sensitive it had never been catalogued in any official royal archive. This was Elizabeth II's most sacred space, a quiet tomb of private fears and suspicions deemed too dangerous to surface. And hadn't gone searching for trouble, but for truth, as tensions inside the firm reached a breaking point amid whispers, rumours, and half-truths that refused to align. Invoking a sovereign clause passed to her by her mother on her deathbed, she entered without question and uncovered what palace aides now describe in hushed tones as the Black Folder, a worn, sealed file labelled in the Queen's own handwriting. Operations inside were documents tied to a highly restricted intelligence briefing from 2019, names redacted, dates blurred, yet the implication unmistakable. A confidential memo, formally stamped and countersigned, linked Meghan Markle indirectly to a compromised asset during a high-security event, an incident quietly buried, flagged for observation, and then forgotten, and read it all in one sitting, motionless, each page confirming suspicions she had carried for years. This was no longer personal mistrust. It was a matter of national security, royal legacy, and a threat that had been underestimated. Her hands trembled not with fear, but fury. Elizabeth had known, had foreseen it, and had chosen silence, protecting the crown to the very end. What stunned and most was not just the content, but the isolation of the knowledge. Charles, William, and the inner circle had never been told. The Queen had compartmentalized everything, ensuring the truth would surface only if absolutely necessary. Now Anne, the daughter who had always served without noise or praise, stood as the final gatekeeper of her mother's last line of defense. And in that moment she made a single, irrevocable decision: this information would never be allowed to sit idle again. And saw it then as unfinished business, because this was never just a file but a warning, a signal that someone had been playing a long game and that the pieces were already in motion. As her eyes reached the final page and an unsigned note written in the Queen's private cipher, and understood what had to be done, she hadn't uncovered mere paperwork. She had uncovered a pattern, one pointing to a carefully orchestrated campaign that had unfolded quietly for years. Behind Meghan's seemingly gentle return to the UK was a sophisticated PR engine and a covert agenda whispered as Operation Rebrand. A strategy not about healing wounds, but reclaiming power, and Anne had no intention of allowing it to succeed. It began subtly, with carefully timed interviews, curated charity appearances, and moments of vulnerability designed to reshape the narrative, transforming Meghan from rebel royal into misunderstood duchess seeking peace. Yet behind the softened image lay an audacious blueprint to reintroduce her not simply as a royal, but as the royal the second coming of Diana. Leaked marketing materials revealed slick presentations meant for private investors, one line underlined in red: "The People's Princess, reimagined, a move and viewed as not a return but a takeover." Reports soon surfaced of Meghan's inner circle flying to London for undisclosed meetings with tabloid executives and media power brokers. Not social dinners, but strategic negotiations trading in image, influence, and information, all conducted in rooms they believed were unseen. Palace eyes, however, were watching. Staff noticed unfamiliar professionals with long lenses and quiet questions, probing for angles to reinforce a single narrative, while some aides reported subtle coercion, offers of money in exchange for carefully framed truths. One junior footman vanished for a week, returning shaken and silent, fueling fears that the firm was being infiltrated not with bugs or wires, but with whispers, innuendo, and payouts. Then came the bombshell, a leaked synopsis of a planned documentary, tentatively titled Traditions and Trauma. Behind the royal smile, crafted to portray the monarchy as cold, racist, and broken, recasting Meghan's departure as survival rather than rebellion, and positioning Princess and herself as the ultimate villain, the Iron Gatekeeper, who slammed the door on progress. When Anne read the synopsis, she reportedly stood in silence, the weight of everything she had uncovered finally settling into a single, inescapable truth. Trembling with fury, and reportedly whispered to an aide, "She wants our name, not our legacy." And in that moment the fight ceased to be political and became deeply personal. Long regarded as the most unshakable royal, and understood that this was no longer about Meghan alone, but about the monarchy itself, and the danger of having its history rewritten by someone who had never borne its weight, scars, or sacrifices. Yet her response was not driven solely by opposition. It was also about protecting someone who could no longer speak Diana. Diana's memory is sacred within the royal family, but and it stands as a warning etched in pain. When Meghan's camp began invoking Diana's legacy to fuel a comeback, and saw it not as homage, but as provocation, even warfare. To Anne, Diana was never a fairy tale princess adored without cost. She was a woman consumed by attention, crushed by expectation, and abandoned once the headlines faded. Their relationship in the 1990s had been strained and complex, marked by misunderstanding and two women confined in very different cages. Yet and watched Diana closely and never forgot what she witnessed. She came to believe that Diana had been used by the media and then destroyed by it, a conviction that hardened into a lifelong scar. So when Meghan's team echoed Diana's language sacrifice, silence, survival campaigns emerged steeped in familiar imagery and emotional beats, invoking victimhood paired with global admiration, and felt history being exhumed and repackaged, not honored but weaponized. What made it unbearable was that Diana could no longer object, and Anne was convinced she would have. Palace insiders recall, and erupting during a private briefing, her voice unusually sharp, insisting that Diana would have despised being turned into a brand to prop up another person's narrative, reportedly saying she hated manipulation and paid for it with her life. Those words landed like a verdict. Then came the letter. How it resurfaced remains unclear, misfiled for decades or deliberately hidden by Elizabeth, but a handwritten note from Diana to Anne, dated months before her death, appeared in the same vault. It was brief and weary, describing a sense of being watched, guided, shaped into someone she no longer recognized, and warning, almost cryptically, about those who smile while steering you into the fire. And read it again and again, and soon after requested a private meeting with William. No aides, no records, just an aunt and nephew bound by grief and responsibility, as the weight of the past pressed inexorably into the present. William broke down as and spoke, not about Meghan or even the monarchy, but about Diana, about patterns repeating, about mistakes disguised as compassion, and about how easily good intentions can become permission for disaster. That conversation sealed Anne's resolve, because what she was fighting now was no longer a PR strategy or a family dispute, but a ghost she refused to let be exploited again. Yet emotion was not the only catalyst. As Anne dug deeper, she uncovered a hidden alliance linking Meghan to the very threat Diana had once feared most. Long-standing whispers of a mole in the palace suddenly took shape when a former aide, once trusted, was exposed as quietly feeding information directly to Meghan's media team. The betrayal ran deep, and Anne's investigators had proof. It began with small inconsistencies, headlines mirroring private palace conversations, staff movements anticipated before schedules were finalized, initially dismissed as press instinct, but Anne did not believe in coincidence. She ordered a discreet investigation outside traditional palace channels, led by loyal security veterans, and soon a red flag appeared. An unauthorized login to a classified royal server, subtle but unmistakable. Following the digital trail led to a familiar name, an aide who had served Meghan during her brief royal tenure, and remained inside the system without suspicion. Surveillance footage from a high-profile charity event confirmed it, capturing a discreet handoff of briefing materials to a woman later identified as a freelance journalist linked to Meghan's former communications firm. The final breakthrough came from a hacked, encrypted email chain titled Brazen, the Windsor strategy, containing references to palace movements, internal polling, and press schedules days before approval. Meghan's camp hadn't merely been watching, they had been directing events remotely through someone left behind, and moved swiftly and silently. Within 48 hours the aide was dismissed under the guise of relocation, no statement, no scandal. But behind the scenes, the implications were explosive. With proof of infiltration in hand, and took an unprecedented step, unilaterally blocking Meghan's reinstatement and declaring her a security threat. Palace aides were stunned, Charles blindsided, and Meghan mid-flight as the decision was made behind sealed doors in an emergency meeting. So sudden senior royals arrived without staff. Meghan's return had already been signaled to the media, flights booked, a narrative of graceful re-entry prepared, and was done with warnings. She entered the room carrying a single folder and invoked a protocol few had ever heard named, let alone used in peacetime, Clause Windsor 17. A Cold War-era provision granting select senior royals the authority to override ceremonial re-entry when an institutional or national threat is identified, presenting evidence of manipulation, infiltration, and an agenda that placed narrative over nation and froze the room. Charles hesitated, seeking diplomacy, while William said nothing, offering only a single nod that, and took as consent, setting in motion consequences that would reverberate through the monarchy like nothing before. A rapid sequence of actions followed that stunned even the palace's most seasoned courtiers. Meghan was already in the air when the order was executed. Her landing clearance was revoked, security withdrawn, and the vehicle arranged to collect her at Heathrow quietly rerouted. Mid-flight, she was informed that access to royal grounds had been denied, and all scheduled engagements suspended, with no explanation beyond a stark directive issued by order of Princess and "Do not proceed." The royal press office attempted to impose a media blackout, but the silence collapsed within hours as leaked messages, intercepted calls, and whispered confirmations reached journalists long trusted by palace aides. Social media erupted with headlines declaring a security breach and a royal family in crisis, polarizing public opinion between accusations of injustice and fervent support for, and as the monarchy's last line of defense. For Anne, the move was neither political nor impulsive, but an act of protection, born of fear not of scandal, but of erosion, the slow dismantling of an institution her mother had devoted her life to preserving. Yet the fallout was only beginning. Within hours, Meghan released a statement that shattered royal convention, directly naming Princess, and in a stark, black-and-white Instagram post accusing senior royals of silencing dissent and hiding behind centuries of secrecy, casting, and as the enforcer who chose protection over truth. The post went viral, ignited further by a short reel juxtaposing Meghan with footage from Diana's 1995 interview and ending with the line, "History doesn't just repeat, it warns," unmistakably linking Meghan's narrative to Diana's suffering. Online sleuths dissected every detail, speculating about hidden messages, metadata clues, and veiled threats, while an American journalist teased an explosive upcoming interview, and celebrities rallied publicly to Meghan's side, transforming her cause into a global movement. The palace remained silent save for one chilling remark from Anne, delivered off camera. "Let her come. We are ready." As the world braced for escalation, attention turned back to the file and had uncovered locked away for years, feared for its power to end legacies. Redacted yet revealing, it outlined a web of cross-border contacts, discreet payouts, and influence flowing both ways, subtle yet persistent, accompanied by Queen Elizabeth's own handwritten annotations confirming a pattern and issuing a final judgment. No return, no trust. A buried clause in Harry's exit agreement revealed the legal trigger and had now activated, and as she closed the file in silence, she resolved to uphold her mother's final command at any cost. In the end, Princess and did more than block Meghan's return. She drew a line in royal blood and dared the world to cross it.